Climate change is a big problem. It's the existential problem of our lifetimes. And with this raising awareness about climate change comes images of plastic pollution, from dead whales on beaches filled with stomachs of plastic to the turtle video. And some people take these images and say they're trying to do a zero waste lifestyle. Hi friends, Sarah here. I talk about a lot of things on this channel, really all revolving around this buzzword of sustainability. And recently I got the chance, with the help of a very nice professor, to make a website and start a fancy little mailing list. So I'm going to link it down in the description, but make sure if you find sustainability interesting or want to hear me talk about more things to subscribe, and to subscribe to the mailing list. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple big questions. How much impact does a zero waste lifestyle actually make? What are some main critiques of the zero waste movement? And what may be some additional or alternative ways to combat the climate crisis in our daily lives? As always, I like to start my videos with definitions so we're all on the same page about what we are talking about. So a zero waste lifestyle is defined by the blog Going Zero Waste as the aim to send nothing to landfill, reduce what we need, reuse as much as we can, send little to be recycled, and compost what we cannot. And it's really important to note here that zero waste was originally a business term, one I actually came across in my operations and supply chains class. So, college degrees, I guess, are useful for some things. So who are these people who are trying to live a zero waste lifestyle? Well, let's start with the first example of Bea Johnson. And just to note that I'm gonna have to generalize a lot in this video, so you've been warned. First, I actually read a whole book by Johnson called Zero Waste Home, which my friend Omri actually gave to me, so thanks Omri for the book, and I'm sorry that I'm about to roast it. Bea spends most of the book talking about how zero waste simplified her lifestyle, and she tells you this by giving tips and tricks for you to use to implement these practices in your daily lives. She also spends the very last part of the book telling you how you can get more involved with the movement, and a even smaller portion talking about the democratic process. Other prominent zero wasters include Lauren Singer, Rob Greenfield, and Catherine Kellogg. If you have heard of any of these people or actually follow them, please let me know. So now that we've figured out the what and the who, let's get into our first question. How much impact does living a zero waste lifestyle actually make? Oh boy. So first we have to talk about and define impact. So I've categorized it in 5 different ways, starting with greenhouse gases, personal waste, systems view waste, mindset, and cultural. First we'll start with greenhouse gases. So the evil material that almost all zero wasters avoid at all costs is plastic. But why? Plastic involves fossil fuels at almost every single stage of its life cycle. A report from the Center for International Environmental Law concluded that at current rates, plastic pollution is exacerbating climate change and will take up a considerable amount of the already shrinking carbon budget to stay under 1.5 degrees of warming, or the agreed upon threshold for really limiting climate change's impact. The report does mention a transition to zero waste communities as a solution, but what it's talking about here is cities and states and governments implementing zero waste strategies in their waste management systems. Another way you can reduce the amount of greenhouse gases emitted is by composting your food, because in the landfill it produces methane. According to the EPA in 2016, the average American makes about 4 pounds of waste per day. So if you're a fellow American, you can save 1,460 pounds of trash each year from the landfill, which in itself is really cool. But then we have to look at the tools that you're using to avoid using single-use products. And so for this, we're going to take the classic symbol of the zero waste movement, the straw. Plastic straws account for 0.0025% of ocean plastic, compared to the 46% of total plastic mass comprised of fishing nets. Some see plastic straws as easily replaceable by metal, bamboo, or glass straws. But are these options actually more sustainable? If we take the example of a metal straw, these metal straws have to be mined somewhere. That'd be funny if straws were just mined, I meant the metal has to be mined from somewhere, and these metals emit greenhouse gases when they're being mined, and also there could be human exploitation alongside mining. How many times would you have to use that metal straw to really make up for the environmental impacts compared to a plastic straw? It's something that we don't think about much. So there's always levels to conversations. And so right now I just compared plastic straws with metal straws. But you could just go above and say, why don't you just not use a straw? But then you have to see on the other side of things that there are people who are dependent on straws, such as disabled people or people in hospitals. But then you go in the bigger systems box and say, why are we wasting all this time talking about straws? It doesn't make sense to me that we would be trying to patch this leak furiously when we could stop the leak to begin with. And I often talk about using systems view when we're talking about things on this channel, and that really just means using a cradle to grave analysis of a thing. A thing does not come into existence once it enters your home. There's a string from its very conception to its waste that we have to consider. One of the problems with bulk bins is, yes, for you it's package free, but there's not really a way to know how these items are transported and in what material. For all we know, it could have been transported in plastic. And the only way you would ever know is if you asked. Somewhere along the chain, waste is created, so there really can never be a true zero waste. Even if the physical aspect of being a zero waster isn't that much, there's this really fascinating argument about doing it for the feels. It feels good to have a tangible result in the things that you're doing to try to help our climate crisis. Maybe the zero waste movement is the introduction for someone into bigger and greater climate activism. Maybe zero waste is a supply and demand problem and you're choosing to vote with your dollar and make those changes to the world that you want to shop in. I'm planning on making a better video about all these more cultural and psychological aspects of environmentalism, so stay tuned for that. But for now, what are your gut reactions to this? So now that we've got all of that down, let's go into some of the critiques of the movement. Let's get back to Bea. I know, her book is titled Zero Waste Home, and she gives tips and tricks for you to implement a zero waste lifestyle. How can you really expect her to go through all the why of plastic pollution, the accessibility and barriers to living a zero waste lifestyle, and the reasons why we have a linear economy? It's a tip and trick book. Those are some critiques of the movement, but another is best said by journalist Alden Wicker when she's talking about gender politics of zero waste. The trope of enthusiastic zero waste gal and her long-suffering male partner is something you'll hear often from zero waste influencer. Wicker goes on to explain the mason jar aesthetic and this clean image of zero waste that's really adding a second layer to these gender politics and really tying into that theory of a second shift, where women work 40-hour work weeks and then go home and work a second shift job as a head of household doing household duties. Again, sweeping generalizations here about who really is adopting a zero waste lifestyle. But from what I've seen and what I've read, it's mostly women and mostly women who are running households. To me, zero waste impact just seems small in comparison to the other things you can do if you're really passionate about climate activism and climate justice. Okay, fair enough, but what are those other ways that you can get involved in climate activism that may be more effective? I obviously don't have all the answers here, but it seems like an hour spent on civic engagement would be much more impactful than an hour spent DIYing your own bread because you didn't want to buy it in packaging, which guilty. Zero waste in its industrial or governmental context is such a great idea, and it's such a cool mindset to implement. So maybe going to your community councils or your local legislatures and telling them about the zero waste movement that cities are doing, like Vancouver, and getting to know those waste systems in your city and seeing how you can help make your city zero waste. And just so you know, my bias is very much showing right now because I'm in the middle of a 21-day civic engagement challenge, which you can see the videos of up above. For a couple months in the fall, I was really trying to get to that goal of zero waste in the lifestyle, and I found that I just had to be really prepared whenever I went places. I'd have to have my utensils, my Tupperware, my water bottle, and I would just feel so guilty when I didn't. And for me, it looked like taking a trek 30 minutes to Sprouts instead of going to Trader Joe's, which is literally all plastic. Not gonna lie, I still do that. But I really don't spend that much time anymore reading about the movement or really DIYing things because I just have better things to do with my time. But I think it also helps that I've incorporated these items into my set point via hedonic adaptation. And so it's really my new normal for me to bring my utensils and going somewhere, and it's not something that I have to consciously think about. Are my actions extra as heck? Yes. Do I still do them? Yes. But would I consider myself zero waste? No. And I think there's a better way to go about this movement, as we've kind of talked about in this video. And there's also an alternative movement called the low impact movement, started by the YouTuber Sustainably Vegan, which I identify so much more with. The low impact movement talks a lot more about accessibility and not perfection, and it doesn't have the word zero in the title, which honestly I think might be the downfall for the zero waste movement. But I don't want this video to be me just bashing on zero waste, because like I said, it's such a cool mindset and such a great idea, but the implementation I just don't think has enough impact to really be a viable solution or a viable contribution to our climate crisis. But if zero waste can incorporate these bigger systems issues into the mason jar chic, then I think the movement has a chance. Environmentalism is hashtag more than straws. Please use this hashtag. I want it to be trending. And to be clear, there are zero wasters who are incorporating political activism into their movements, and I just wanted to add some sprinkle of nuance into the conversation and share my thoughts. So I hope you have some thoughts too. If so, please comment down below and I would love to have a conversation with you. If there's anything that you want clarification on, I'm happy to give it, and I would love to know your main takeaway from this video. Thank you for watching, friend, and I'll see you in the next one.